everybody, I'm going to do a video today about how to get started on your coil pot and how to create your paper cutout in your template. So I thought I'd start by finding some examples of coil pots around my house, and you can see they have lots of different shapes and you can do lots of different designs in the surface. Here's another example. This one has applique on it, and these are all made with stacking coils, which are ropes of clay, on top of each other and then shaping them as you go. So one of the best ways to do this is to create a template, and that helps you measure out your form. I wanted to share with you also my pot that I got at the Acoma Pueblo, and you can see that this is hand coiled, and what makes these really interesting is like the very fine detailed line work that is made with yucca brushes by hand, and this is a polychrome pot. So that means all the colors on here are from slips or minerals or rocks found in their environment. So, and many of these things have coded definitions. This is an example of a seed pot. It has a very small opening, and this is a very, what we would consider a horizontal pot rather than a vertical pot. So we're going to start working on how to create something that's symmetrical and coiled like this. Scissors, blank paper, a marker, shiny ads or thicker paper such as cardstock or cardboard, clay, a metal rib or credit card, pop can, ruler, and a knife. Okay, to start with, materials we need to use to create a template: piece of notebook paper or photocopy paper. If you've got a ruler, that's helpful. A pop can, something like a shiny ad, and some scissors. And don't forget a marker. First of all, we're going to take a look at your sketch and determine what is the outside shape that you're going for. When we create your shape for that template, we want to really think about, if we split that pot in half, what that outside line looks like. So first of all, if you don't have a ruler at home, a ruler is very helpful. We can use things that are found in your house. A typical pop can is almost 5 inches. So if you make your coil pot a little bit taller than this, you'll get to the 5-inch range. And this measurement at the bottom of the coil pot is roughly 2.5 inches. So we don't want to make the base of our coil pot any wider than this. So use that as a gauge. Also, we know that photocopy paper is usually 8 inches or 8.5 inches. So we're just gonna kind of round it to 8 by 11. So if we know that we have about 8.5 inches on here, if I fold it up for more than what I would guess an inch is, that should get us to 7 inches. So I'm just going to fold that up. So this will create the maximum height from this point to here of a 7-inch coil pot. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this part off. Okay, so remember when we were kids, I did this in probably kindergarten to create my own Valentines. We're going to fold your paper over. So this is your folded side, this is your paper side. And now we're going to try to draw this outside shape from your sketch right here, so that we're creating a symmetrical cutout of what your pot should look like. So this is step 1. So using my sketch and my pencil, I'm going to start here and right against the fold and draw what I think my outside edge should be. pretty good. So I'm going to cut this out. So just make sure that I can always cut more off. I'm just going to cut around that line. And remember, we drew that outside edge. Here's the fold. So now, just like a Valentine, we can open it up and now we can see what our approximate form of our pot would look like. So I've got this, it's symmetrical, and this is what we would consider our paper cutout. We're going to take a picture of this for our work in process journal. Now, I've been saving up lots of these shiny ads. If you don't have a shiny ad, it's okay. You can use the outside of your paper that you cut as your template, but this is really flimsy paper. So if we could transfer this shape onto something that's a little bit more durable, like these shiny ads, or a piece of cardboard, or the front of your notebook, this is going to stand up a little bit longer because we're going to use this template that we're going to create every day when we're building. So I'm going to clear this off, and we're going to create that template. So what I like to do is I just like to take my piece and I just open it up and put the shiny ad inside it. And then I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to make a line that goes straight out here and goes straight down here. And then I'm going to trace the outside of my pot shape. Okay? So now we have something that looks like this. And this is going to be our tool that we're going to use. So then I'm going to go ahead and cut. You can see this is just a little bit heavier than regular paper. So it's going to stand up when I use this to measure my piece when I'm doing my construction. So now we're going to cut on that inside of the line. And people often keep this part, but we don't need this part. So go ahead and rip it up and recycle it. The part that is most important to us is this template. And what I like to do is I like to label the top of it. So when I'm using it, I know this is the top and this is the bottom. So when you get these done, you're going to take a picture of your template and your paper cutout as your preliminary steps before you begin working in clay on your coil pot. So this is part one. Creating the measuring tool is going to help us create a symmetrical, means the same on, if you split it down the middle, it'll be the same on both halves, coil pot. And this is going to help us determine where our coil placement is going to be.
Coil pot needs to be vertical. That means it's taller than it is wide. The dimensions for your coil pot are no taller than 7 inches and no shorter than 5 inches. So the width must be smaller than the height to be considered a vertical form.
So when we get done with our coil pot base, it should look somewhat like this. We have a flat bottom, should be all smooth together, and this should be what you should be able to accomplish for day one. So the materials you need for this, your template. I like to have just a piece of kind of this shiny, stronger ad or cardboard, and we're gonna actually set your clay on top of this so that it doesn't stick to the table and it just slides on this paper base. A knife, and either a credit card or your silver flexible metal rib, okay? And then finally our clay. So what I'm doing is I'm using the clay that I had from my previous projects, and I'm gonna go ahead and start on coil rolling. So the first thing we're gonna do is get that clay out of the bag. And we're gonna just rip off a chunk. And we're gonna squish it with our hands. So this is really nice plastic clay because I've been adding water to it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently roll my coils. So when I'm doing this, I want to stand up actually. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to just apply the gentlest pressure when I am rolling this. And I roll this from the bottom of my hand to the top of my fingertips. And I really don't have to roll a really long coil because our pieces are rather, they're vertical, so they're going to be thinner than they are tall. So this is a good size coil. You can see it's about the size of my finger. It's not too small. If you're working smaller than this, you might have a really weak piece that you're working with. So, and again, I do this very lightly, and I try to give an example of how I use such a light pressure that it would be like if I'm trying to pat a newborn baby on the head without waking them up. That's about the degree of pressure that I use. I use a very light touch with this. So we're going to do another one just to show you another example. So I'm going to keep this over here. And I'm going to get my next piece of clay ready. And again, it's easier to smush it into a log form than to just take that whole clump of clay and try to roll it out. So, and you'll need about 2 feet of space to do this properly. So you might want to use your kitchen counter or a table surface. And again, I like to stand up, and I'm standing right now as I roll my coils out using a very light pressure. You can see sometimes you've got these little dents. It is okay. The main thing is that you're not rolling the square coils, okay? Now I made this look easy. You may need to practice this quite a bit, but what you're looking for is even coils that are not too thin, and again, about the size of, you know, a fat finger, and that's what we're going for this, okay? So while I'm setting my clay aside, while I'm working on another piece, I'm gonna make sure I have a piece of paper towel that is wet, and I'm gonna keep it over the piece that I'm working on, or you can keep some plastic over that piece as well to keep it from evaporating. This is one of the things that we're gonna have to do consciously in the studio at home, because at school, whenever you need a new piece of clay, you could go ahead and recycle it in the pugger with some more water. But for us, we are going to just cover it up with a piece of like damp paper towel or plastic to keep the evaporation down. So I like to start my coil pots with a coil. You know, if you're doing coiling, why not do coiling from the beginning? And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split my coil in half, because I know I'm going to do a very small base. This pop can we mentioned previously is about 2.5 inches, and you should not go any wider for your base than the bottom of a pop can. So if you don't have a pop can, find something that's similarly sized, like a water bottle, and don't exceed that base size, because one of the biggest things that beginners make mistake with is they start with a base that's way too wide, and they're only, you know, then they end up with a more horizontal piece than a vertical piece. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this, prepare it one more time, and I'm going to create this by what I call the cinnamon roll technique, where I am going to curl it in on itself so there are no gaps or spaces, and I'm just rolling it in. So that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to cut off that piece, put it underneath my towel, and we're going to work on that a little bit. So here we go. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to smooth out this base, and I'm going to press it down a little bit. This compression is going to help it from cracking in the kiln when it dries. And I got this done, and now I need to do the same thing on the other side. So it might be kind of sticky, so gently peel it up and then do the same thing on the other side. We don't want to see any evidence that it was a spiral before. Yes, you could do this with a slab, but I say if you're doing coil, why not just commit to it completely? And I'm pressing it down, and I'm compressing those clay particles so that I have a very strong base. Now let's check it. You can see it's a little bit bigger than my pop can, so I'm going to trim down the outside edge. And I know that this is the little rim, so I'm going to give it about this much extra to trim with. Okay? So let's go ahead, put it here, and I'm just going to trim it to get it pretty circular, but I'm not worrying too much that it's absolutely perfect. All right. So we've got that. Take off the edges. And then you can also roll it around on the table, have like a little wheel to kind of smooth those edges in. And I'm going to get rid of that pop can mark. And we've got a good size base to begin with. So compared to the previous video that I showed you or had you watch, this is much smaller than that base. So I've got my base, and now I'm going to take that shiny ad, I'm going to put it right here, so now it doesn't stick to the table and my paper just moves really easily. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my first coil. So I'm going to again smooth this out, and I'm going to take this coil and I'm going to wrap it right on top of the previous, or on the base. So what I do with this is I overlap it and I give it a side cut. And then I'll show you what that looks like with the camera. So basically I'll overlap that coil so it has that side cut, so I can remove this piece and I can remove the piece underneath, and I can just slide this piece right in there, and then I've got a really nice joined edge. So I'm just going to smooth that, blend it in a little bit, and now it's time to get that first piece to adhere to the base. So we're not using what we typically would do in ceramics, which is taking a fork, making score marks and slipping this, putting slip on it. But what you're doing is you're grabbing with your finger part of the coil that's on top and blending it into the bottom. This is why you don't want to have teeny tiny thin coils, because if you're blending half of it into the base of your piece, then your walls become even thinner, and then they could become very delicate and smushy, and then they could fall apart. So here we go, we've got our first coil on. So now I want to take my template and I want to measure from the base, and I think we need to just push that first coil out, and I'm going to do that by just pushing it out so that I can follow this line. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get my second coil on. I'll hold it up at the side angle. So now we're going to do the second coil. Again, let's put those little pieces that we're not using under a damp paper towel or piece of plastic, keep them wet. And we're going to put our next coil on. And I'm putting it on the outside edge just a little bit more because I know that I have this kind of dramatic curve that goes right here. So I'm going to put this on top of the previous coil. And I want to make sure that I'm not putting it where I did my previous seam. I'm going to stagger this, kind of like bricklaying. You don't ever see bricks one directly on top of the other, but they're like two bricks and there's one in the middle and two bricks. So you can take a look at how brickwork is done, and they alternate it so it's stronger. So again, I made that diagonal cut. I'm gonna remove that little bottom piece. This piece slides into place, remove the top, and now I have my second coil put on my piece. So now it's time to, again, blend your coil on the inside. And you're gonna see that I use both hands when I'm coiling. So I'm gonna hold my non-dominant hand. So if I'm right-handed, I'm gonna hold my left hand on the outside, like I'm cupping this. And then I'm going to blend against my hand so that I'm not, if I don't have my hand here, it's gonna go all, it could spread out more than I want it to. So this holds it in while I do my blending. And right now I'm just blending the inside coils. I personally like to build up 3 coils and then I'll do my outside blending. Some people like to blend every coil on the inside and the outside. So we've got our second coil put on, and now I'm going to take a look and see if this is if it's traveling the direction I want it to, and it's not. So I'm going to push it out so it is going to touch my template, and notice that I'm spinning it around and making sure that all my walls are going that same direction. This makes sure that your piece is going to be symmetrical. Okay, so it'll push out a little bit more when I do the next one, but if I show you from a side angle, I don't know if you can see that well, but at the base, now my coils are starting to follow this line going up, okay? So that's what it looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna put on my third coil, and then what I will do is I will start blending my outside edge. So again, just rolling out my coil a little bit more, making sure wherever I had the previous seam, I don't put my next seam. So my previous seam was there, so I'm gonna make sure my seam goes here. So here we go, make sure that coil goes out a little bit more, and then do my diagonal cut. So now we're gonna, again, hold your hand on the outside, blend. Okay, so now again, I'm gonna take my template, hold it on that outside edge, and make sure that my outside wall is gonna hit that curve. If I've stretched out too much, I'll push it back in. Okay, so here we go. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna smooth my outside. So you can see for the outside, I have lots of little marks on it, but I haven't joined any of my coils. So you can see the three distinct coils in the base and the outside. So this is where this tool is very handy. If you've got clay on the edge of this, you can just take your knife and just get some of that, clean it off a little bit, or clean it off with water. But we don't want to introduce any water to the space. We're gonna do everything by smoothing together with what water is already in the clay. And as you can see, as I'm smoothing the outside, I'm holding my hand, my left hand on the inside, so that I'm not letting that clay push in too much either. Okay, so you can see it's starting to get smoother. I'll take this off the bottom. If you get paper on the bottom, no worries, because it's gonna burn out. But we're starting to smooth that base. I'm gonna smooth it a little bit more. So that all my coils are smooth. And then this is enough for me for day one. I'm gonna let that base set up for 3 days in a plastic bag. So again, use my template. Make sure everything is following the line that I want it to take. So again, if I show you, here's the piece, and it's really starting to follow that edge with the template, okay? So there it is. So we're gonna continue to follow that line. So how to wrap up? You are going to, you don't need to add any water to this. My suggestion is to take your paper off of it, but you can sit it right back on your paper once you've got it wrapped up in plastic. So you could either put this into a Ziploc bag, or what I'm gonna do is just put it into a plastic bag that I have, like a grocery bag, and wrap this around and push the bag into the middle, and then put something on top of it. It's got a little tiny bit of weight, like a marker, maybe just, you know, like a little rock or something. And please have a dialogue with your parent or your guardian to make sure that they know that you're doing a new build and that we don't lose this, you know, because it looks, you know, looks like just a piece of garbage in a bag. So let them know that you are working on that base of the coil pot. So this is what we expect you to have done for day one. Okay? Have a good one.